It's 10 p.m. in Kumasi, 6 p.m. in New York, and 11 p.m. in London. It's 7 a.m. in Tokyo, Japan. This is NEWSAT10, and we're live from the News Hub at Adesawe Kanda in Accra. I'm Stephen NT, and we're also live on your DSTV channel 279 and streaming on Facebook and on 3news.com. Over the next half hour, we'll bring you the day's news wrap. But first, let's start with the summaries. More than 12,000 workers lost their jobs between 2015 and August 2018 in the private sector, according to media reports. These figures appear to be only a fraction of what is yet to unfold, despite government touting the private sector as the engine of growth for the country. And the National Service Secretariat extends the registration for applicants to December 31 following challenges in getting all prospective service personnel registered. Officials of the scheme have therefore urged those yet to be posted to remain calm as they are in talks with agencies to get them posted. And the Education Ministry recommends self-placement in schools with vacancies for more than 60,000 candidates who qualified to senior high schools but could not be placed under the computerized school selection placement system. 67,382 qualified candidates could not be matched with any of their school choices. And in business, Senior Minister Yao Safo-Mafo says he is confident the Ghana-China bauxite deal will accelerate the Ghana Beyond Aid agenda. He was speaking at the opening of the Ghana Economic Forum in Accra today. Those are our major news highlights. Remember, we're streaming live on Facebook and on 3news.com. You can also hear me live on 3FM 92.7. Up next is the big one. Welcome back. Now, the government is attempting to secure a long-term loan in the form of the $50 billion century bond from China. Government sources say the rationale behind the decision to opt for the long-term bond is that such loans carry low interest rates. Government notes that the loan is going to be contracted according to international best practice, and proceeds from that 50 billion century bond will help ensure and improve infrastructural development in the country. President Akufo-Addo has also signed some 8 Ghana-China cooperation agreements in Beijing, and discussions about ultra long-term debts have been fraught with uncertainty due in part to interest rate fluctuations that can lower yields for investors. However, some analysts say there is growing demand for these types of bonds. All right, so we're going quickly to Skype now. We have been joined by senior analyst at HRS Market, Dr. Theo Echampong. Good evening, Doc. We're grateful for your time on NEWSAT10. Now, tell me, does it make economic sense first to go for a 50 billion Chinese loan in what has been referred to as the century bond?
Okay, good evening, and it's actually IHS Market, not HIS. But coming back to the substantive issue that you raised on whether or not it makes economic sense, we need to ask the critical question really more of what the current absorptive capacity of the Ghanaian economy is, and whether or not it can actually sustain, an injection of $50 billion of investment going into infrastructure, i.e., roads, bridges, interchanges, rural network, etc. Just to put this into a bit of context and perspective for you, the proposed 50 billion is actually 115% of Ghana's 2017 GDP. If you actually look at the plans that are being mooted in terms of what this money would be used for, that is still lacking at the moment. We have not as yet seen any prospectus, that would give us the nitty-gritty detail on what the money would be used for, even though we know we have a deficit, infrastructure deficit that needs to be catered into account. And number two, this is of course going to increase the public debt. 50 billion coming into the country at the moment where we are just coming off the back or just about finishing the IMF extended credit facility agreement and some improving fundamentals, in the economy. I think is going to be too much of a shock to the system. And so perhaps, and I'm just second guessing here, what we really need to ask from the government is getting a bit more detail on where the monies will be used for and whether actually 50 billion is going to come in one big tranche, or we're actually looking at it in multiple tranches, which would be in sync with the growth of the economy, but also the absorptive capacity of,
right.
Of the economy.
So, Doc, let's take it one by one, bit by bit. You're saying that the 50 billion coming in will be more like a shock. Of course, I am also aware that we don't know the details. You've alluded to that already. But tell me, $50 billion bond, is this practical?
It is practical to the extent that we've seen other emerging markets in other countries issue much long tenor denominated bonds in excess of 30 years to 50 years. I have read, certainly within the literature and in other jurisdictions, people posting much longer denominated bonds. But when it comes to Ghana specifically, you can actually see that as part of the government's medium-term to long-term debt management strategy, there has been a move or a shift towards more long tenor bonds. So we've seen the issuance of 2 bonds last year for 20 years and then another one for 30 years, of which the coupon rate on that was just about 7 point something percent. And so there has been that sort of move towards that sort of position when it comes to dealing with the debt issue and going for more long tenor denominated bonds. We've seen certainly in emerging markets, other countries moving towards that same direction. The question really becomes not so much about the duration, but as to the quantum coming in, but also critically what the monies will be used for and whether or not we can even ensure that there's value for money with the projects that will be used. These monies will be used for.
Right. I'll come to the value for money bit pretty shortly. But apart from this long-term bond, that 50 billion that we're talking about, President Akufo-Addo has signed some 8 Ghana-China cooperation agreements in Beijing. I'm sure many of my viewers and listeners will also want to know, are we not giving too much than we are expecting to get back?
When you say too much, then we're expecting to get back. Remember that not all of these deals are necessarily loans in that sense of the word. Some of them are MOU or cooperation agreements. Some of them are actually loans in that sense of the word, where the money is coming into the economy. But the Chinese, of course, in all of these negotiations would certainly be expecting something in return for the monies that they're bringing into the economy. So when you look at the 8 agreements that have been signed, and then the key highlight being the Sino-Hydro deal with Ghana's bauxite or alumina, which is going to be used to substitute or repay the loans, you can actually see that we have had similar agreements in the past. So this is not exactly new in that sense of the word. We had the Bui Dam agreement, which we service with, if I do recall correctly, about 30 tons of cocoa every year. The CDB loan facility, the 3 billion CDB loan facility, about 1 billion of that money, or 1.5 billion, came in, and for that we used part of the Jubilee crude oil, receipts due to the state of Ghana to service that loan. So this particular agreement coming in follows in the line of previous agreements that we've signed with the Chinese. And when you actually look at other arrangements with other countries such as Angola, such as Zambia, and even in Zimbabwe, these infrastructure-backed loans follow or fall within that same trend. What is critical for Ghana as a country is ensuring that whatever money that we get and whatever resource that we're going to use to repay the loans, be it gold or bauxite or any other natural resource, it is actually commensurate with the tenor and with the terms of the loan.
I also know that there have been instances where we've signed agreements with China and the money has not been forthcoming. So you spoke about value for money. At what point would you say that indeed value for money has been achieved?
Well, value for money to the extent that the projects that we are going to use the monies for can, catalyze wider development in the economy. But also when we benchmark the cost of these projects, they would be within industry accepted norms and practices. So we need to ask the question of if we're going to build a bridge or a school or some sort of dam in one region or the other, what should be the reasonable cost for these dams and bridges? What should be the markup? So once we've done the project selection, the due diligence, the identification, it then allows us to then track and benchmark the cost of these projects relative to what was actually spent in terms of the outlay. And you're absolutely right. We have had or signed agreements with the Chinese in the past, a notable one being the 3 billion CDB facility, of which only 1.5 billion of that came into the country, because the other projects we bundled into the master facility agreement. Not all of them were bankable projects in that sense of the word. So sometimes we tend to see these big high level, big ticket numbers bandied about, but it all comes down to the nitty-gritties. As they say, the devil is always going to be in the detail.
And quickly, looking at the previous agreements and previous bonds, I beg your pardon, we've posted with coupon rates and all of that. Do you get the sense that the president or Team Ghana went into this negotiation and deal with the best brokers?
I think we have to give the government the benefit of the doubt. Historically, regardless of which government is in power, we have always never really negotiated the best deals as such, because sometimes we actually don't get the transaction advice that is needed. So there are entities, there are firms, there are people out there who have negotiated similar arrangements in the past in their private capacity or for other governments out there who can help, the government structure the terms of the agreement, and then the duration, the loan, the servicing, the tenor. It'll be a bit difficult to speak to it at the moment without really seeing the nitty-gritty details of the agreement that has been signed.
Right,
but as a general comment, I would say that we have expertise. There are people out there, and even if the expertise is not available, people can be brought in from outside to support the government, to negotiate the best agreement. And it's not just about the duration, but things around technology transfer, things around local content, to ensure that when these projects actually get off the ground, we have, the integration of that with the wider economy.
All right, Dr. Theo Champong, we're grateful for your time. Theo Champong is a senior analyst at IHS Market. I'm Stephen Enti. This is still News at 10. You can hear me live on 3FM 92.7. We're streaming on Facebook and on 3news.com. We'll be back. Welcome back. Now, more than 12,000 workers have lost their jobs between 2015 and 2018 in the private sector, according to media reports. These figures appear to be only a fraction of what is yet to unfold, despite government touting the private sector as the engine of the country's growth.
Many job losses in the past 3 years was blamed on the power crisis and a business environment many described as not conducive. But 2 years on, with the power crisis seemingly a thing of the past, and a government with ideology of promoting businesses, it hasn't gotten any better. In his address on May Day, President Akufo-Addo promised the reduction in electricity tariffs as a major plank in this policy, and the effect should be visible soon in an improvement in the cost of doing business and confidence in the economy as a whole, saying, "As these reforms and changes work their way through the system, I am certain that we should very soon be seeing a vigorous turnaround in the creation of jobs in the private sector." Ironically, however, some 12,000 jobs are reported to have been lost in the formal sector between 2016 and very soon be seeing a vigorous turnaround in the creation of jobs in the private sector. Ironically, however, some 12,000 jobs are reported to have been lost in the formal sector between 2016 and 2018, a figure obviously exacerbated by the turmoil in the banking sector, where over 3,000 jobs have been lost, with the number expected to increase as the central bank takes its supervisory role more seriously and more banks predicted to go down, a newly formed consolidated bank expected to shed more of its unrequired adopted staff. The job losses in the financial sector alone over the past 3 years is staggering if one should add those of the microfinance and savings and loans companies that went bust for various reasons. The job losses, some experts argue, could still be laid at the doorsteps of the Dumsor era that caused businesses not breaking even and layoffs that may have affected consumer indexes. TV3 analysis of media reported job losses in the formal sector alone stands at some 12,550. How that plays on the national figure and ratio of unemployment will be hard to tell in a country where the release of statistics could delay by at least 2 years.
And the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association, GIBA, is warning of more layoffs in the media over what they describe as hard times in the country. President of GIBA, Andrew Danso Eninkra, speaking earlier on News 360, says the Labour Commission must take keen interest in the happenings within the media in Ghana.
Engaging them to find out why they are laying people off is not the real solution to the problem. But I think we need to also find out what is happening in the general landscape, the economy of the country. Why are these things happening at this time? Why are we seeming to be getting a trend? It started from some area. You heard about the mines, you heard about the banks, now it is in the media. So it is important to study, to understand, number one. Number two, we think that also probably certain key figures, certain key personalities are not being proactive in looking at some of these areas, because
who are these figures we're talking about?
I would straight away talk about the owners of companies. I would straight away talk about government officials who are in charge of some of these areas, who manage our economy for us, people who take decisions, especially we probably are hearing of the 3 media houses because they are affiliated or they are related to some banks, and therefore we probably did not look at the effect of it when we were touching the banking or let's say the financial area.
So their affiliation to other companies that are struggling.
That is one.
Within a particular conglomerate.
That is one.
Could have led to this.
That is one. Two, there are other people who can see beyond what we see. There are people who are experienced. Let me use ourselves as an example. I mean, GIBA had been talking about the fact that the inability of government to set out a clear guideline for the switch over from analog to digital is going to have effect on television. We foresee this happening very soon, especially when we are getting foreign players in the industry, players who are themselves players and now becoming referees, who are going to manage the industry.
In essence, bringing in already packaged, imported content,
and not
that
just
which
that,
will be created.
Not just that, but
internally.
even relying on local workforce, the knowledge, the know-how I mean, for instance, you have somebody coming from outside to ask you what is the way to your room, and you are showing the person the way to your room, and yet he is the one you are paying to do that work. We think that does not augur well for the industry in the country, and it also raises our fear that it's going to lead to further layoffs, and then we are not going to get people also being properly employed. You know, that is one of the fears that we have expressed, and we foresee that happening very soon. And we believe that government will have to start responding to this. I mean, for instance, we are very surprised that we have been talking about this particular issue. I mean, the layoffs, and up till now, we have not heard anything yet about it.
I wonder if there's anything to say. But Mr. Ninkra, thank you very much for your time. He's the president of the Ghana Independent Workers Association, that's GEBA, and joining us this evening on the layoffs in the media.
The Ghana National Fire Service has begun investigations to ascertain the cause of the fire which gutted Sita Kel Hotel in Kumasi Tuesday morning, destroying property in the one-story building. The swift intervention by the fire service averted the blaze from causing more damage. Here's a report by correspondent Ibrahim Abubakar.
The fire started from one of the hotel rooms and spread to 5 other rooms at the time occupants were having their breakfast. No casualty was recorded. Hotel staff and residents attempted to douse the fire but were unable to do so due to the lack of a fire extinguisher. Personnel of the fire service swiftly intervened to fight the fire from spreading to other rooms and nearby facilities. Deputy Ashanti Regional Fire Commander DO1 Henry Jiwa advised facility owners and managers to ensure extinguishers and fire detectors are functional. He bemoaned the fire could have been contained easily if the hotel had extinguishers.
But what I can advise us, the public should try and buy extinguishers and be trained on how to use them properly. The one who first saw the fire could have attacked the fire if he's been trained.
Investigations has been launched to ascertain the cause of the fire.
That's how we wrap up with News at 10. Thank you very much for making time. On behalf of the crew, good night. Sports Unlimited is up next.